Hello everyone, how are you all today? This is Ashar Khan, your SST teacher from Shiv Jyoti Educational Group, Kota. So students, today we are beginning our new history chapter, that is chapter number 9. Okay, so open your books on page number 91. We're beginning a new chapter, that is traders, kings and pilgrims. Okay, so in this chapter, as you can see, we are going to learn about three types of people. We are going to learn about traders, we're going to learn about some kings as well as some pilgrims. So let us glance at the topics that we are going to cover in this chapter. First topic that we are going to learn about belongs to the traders, that is how to find about trades and traders. We are going to learn about the ancient trades of India. Then new kingdoms along the coast, that means we'll be learning about the kings, okay, who set up kingdoms along the coast. And a very interesting topic, that is the story of the Silk Route. Okay, so we'll be covering that as well. Then the spread of Buddhism. Then we'll move on to the pilgrims part. Okay, what are pilgrims? Holy men who go to holy travel. Now the spread of Buddhism, the quest of the pilgrims, and last topic will be the beginning of Bhakti. So these are the topics that we're going to cover in this chapter. So students, I hope you have opened your book on page number 91. Keep your pencils ready in front of you, as we always do. Now, let us start with the first topic, that is how to find out about trades and traders. So students, in our earlier chapters, we have learned about northern black polished ware, right? We learned about some earthen pots which were found in different parts of the country, right? This fine pottery, especially bowls and plates, were found from several archaeological sites throughout the subcontinent. Now, these bowls were not only found at one place, they were found at different places across our country. Now, how do you think it reached these places? How do these objects reach to different places? That's what we are going to learn about through trades. Okay, so traders may have carried them from the places where they were made to sell them at other places. Now, what the traders used to do, they used to purchase objects from one place, and then they will travel to another place to sell that particular object. And that is why the black ware, the northern polished black ware, was found in different parts of India. Now, South India especially was famous for gold, spices, especially pepper and precious stone. Now, South India was very famous. Okay, what for? It was famous for gold, spices, especially pepper and precious stones. Pepper was particularly valued in the Roman Empire. Now, the Roman Empire, which lies in Europe, it was so popular there, it was so popular there that in the Roman Empire, it was known as black gold. Okay, the black pepper that we use, the spices that we eat in our daily food, that was known as black gold in the Roman Empire. Okay. Now, so traders carried many of these goods to Rome in ships across the sea and by land in caravans. Okay, now the traders, they came from two areas, either by land or either by sea. There must have been quite a lot of trade, as many Roman gold coins have been found in South India. In the southern India, when we have excavated these sites, we have found Roman gold coins. Now, the coins from the country of Rome, how did these coins reach the place of South India? Why? Because of trades. Early traders, they used to come here to trade. Okay, what did they used to trade? They used to trade gold, spices like pepper from South India, and they used to pay in gold coins, and that is why gold coins are found in the southern India. Now, travelers explored several sea routes. Some of these followed the coast. There were others across the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, where sailors took advantage of the monsoon winds to cross the seas more quickly. As you can see here, it is written that the sailors, they sailed from these regions, they sailed across the sea in sailing ships with the help of monsoon winds. Okay, and with the help of these winds, they were able to reach the Indian coastline more quickly. So these sailors, they used to take advantage of the monsoon winds to cross the seas more quickly. So if they wanted to reach the western coast of the subcontinent, this is the western coast of India, the western coast of the subcontinent. From East Africa or Arabia, they choose to sail with the southwest monsoon, and sturdy ships had to be built for the long journeys. Now they had to build powerful, strong ships so they can make the long journey by sea, because they have to build them. Okay. Now, let us move on to our next topic, that is new kingdoms along the coast. Now, new kingdoms started developing along the coasts of South India, because most of the trade was focused in South India. Okay. Now, here is our India, and this is the southern subcontinent area, as you can see here. Now, the long coastline was dotted with the hills, plateaus and fertile river valleys. Okay, it has a long coastline, which means the land which is connected to water. Now, in this particular places, kingdoms started flourishing. You remember, students, in our earlier chapter, we learnt about the Magad Empire, correct? What happened? The Magad Empire, they set their capital near a forested region. Why? So that they can harvest the resources of the forest. Similarly, the kings along the southern coast, the kings regarding these places, now they also set up their places in the areas where trade was in high demand. Okay, so let us read first. The southern half of subcontinent is marked with a long coastline with hills, plateaus and river valleys, and among the river valleys that the Kaveri is the most fertile. Okay, now chiefs and kings who controlled the river valleys and the coast became rich and powerful. Okay, now the people who used to control these valleys and rivers, they became powerful. How? Because they used to collect taxes from people who used to come by these rivers. Sangam poems mention the Movendar. What is the Movendar now? Underline this. This is a Tamil word meaning three chiefs used for the heads of three ruling families. Now there were three ruling families which were ruling in the southern India. Who were they? They were the Cholas, the Cheras and the Pandyas. You can underline this as well, the names of the three ruling families, the Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. Okay. Now this was the South India. As we have already discussed, that the South India was particularly famous in gold, precious stones and spices, right? That is black pepper. It was very much demanded by the Romans. Moving on. Now, as I just told you that strong sturdy ships had to be built so that they can reach the coastline of India. Roman gold coins were found across the southern India. Okay. As you can see here, that the three ruling families of southern India used to be focused on these parts, that is Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. There was another family, the Satavahanas. We are going to learn about them in a moment as well, and they were ruling over this area. Now, each of the three chiefs had two centers of power, one inland and one on the coast. Of these 6 cities, 2 were very important: Puhar or Kaveri Pattanam, the port of the Cholas, and Madurai, which was the capital of the Pandyas. Now these chiefs, the ruling families, they were the Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. They each had 2 centers of power, means 2 capital cities. One inland, that means one city they had inland, okay, and one city they had near to the coast, so that they can control the trade. Now Puhar or Kaveri Pattanam was the port of the Chola Empire, and the Madurai was the capital of the Pandya family. As you can see, Kaveri Pattanam and Madurai both are shown here on the map. Okay, beautiful temples were built there. Now, next paragraph. The chiefs did not collect regular taxes. Okay, instead they demanded and received gifts from the people. Now, taxes were not imposed in these areas, that they used to demand and receive gifts from the people. There is a word that we have learned in our earlier chapters in history. What was the word that we used to use for the money which the king used to take as a form of gift? It was called tribute. Okay. They also went on military expeditions and collected tribute from neighboring areas. They kept some of the wealth and distributed the rest among their supporters, including members of their families, soldiers and poets. Now, what the kings used to do, they used to go on military expeditions, they used to attack the surrounding areas, okay? And whatever wealth they used to take from those areas, they used to take some part for themselves and some for their families, soldiers and poets. Many poets whose compositions are found in the Sangam collection composed poems in praise of chiefs, who often rewarded them with precious stones, gold, horses, elephant, chariots and fine cloth. Now the chief used to reward the poets. Now there is a word given here, Sangam collection or Sangam literature. Now this, what is Sangam literature? It is a collection of stories and poems originating from the South India. Okay. Now military expeditions to neighboring areas were there in the southern India during that time. Also, as we have learned, wealth distributed was among the supporters, soldiers and family members and poets. You can see gold coins here. Now, Poems were composed in praise of the rulers, and the rulers, they used to pay those poets. Now, let us move on to our next paragraph. In this paragraph, we are going to learn about another dynasty which emerged in India, that was the Satvana dynasty. Now, around 2000 years later, a dynasty known as the Satvanas became powerful in Western India. The most important ruler of the Satvana was Gautamiputra Sri Satkarni. So, students, on page number 93, write your first internal question. Write your first internal question on page number 93. I am reciting it. Who was the most powerful ruler of the Satvahana dynasty? Okay, the spelling of the Satvahana is written here as well. It is written in your book as well, so don't write it in the wrong manner. Who was the most powerful ruler of the Satvahana dynasty? Write it on page number 3. Okay, and here you can underline the answer. On the third paragraph, fourth line, Gautamiputra Sri Satkarni was the most powerful ruler of the Satvahana dynasty. Okay, and we know about him from an inscription composed on behalf of his mother, Gautami Bala Shri. Now, let us learn about Satvahana dynasty. Now, Satvana dynasty, they used to rule in the part of Western India. Now, this part was Mauryan dynasty, correct? Now, this part here was the Satvahana empire. Okay, we all know that the lower parts were Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. Now, this was the coin during the Satvana dynasty, the coins which was used during that time, and Chandragupta Maurya, okay, emerged from there. Like after Mauryan empire declined, then Satvana dynasty became powerful. This was the trade route along the Mauryan period. This was the trade route means this was the route through which the traders from foreign countries used to come towards India, okay, and then they used to move towards China. Okay, now these are the sub routes, that means small roads which used to lead in the interior of the country. As you can see, Gautamiputra Sri Satkarni was the most important and powerful ruler of the Satvahana dynasty. Satvana rulers were known as Dakshinapati, the lord of Dakshinapat. Now, another important bit here is given. The Satvana rulers were known as lords of Dakshinapat or Dakshinapati. Now, this is a Hindi word. What does this mean? Dakshinapat literally means the route leading to the south, okay, which was also used as a name for the entire southern region. Means the road which the people used to take to come to the southern part of the country, that road was called Dakshinapat. Okay, Dakshinapat means road to the south. And furthermore, what happened? The entire part of this country, okay, came to be known as Dakshinapat. Now, they commanded Dakshinapat as it was the best trade route with gold mines and seaports. Now, just because they had influence over that route, it increased their power, it increased their wealth. How so? He sent his army to the eastern, western and the southern coast. The rulers of the Satvana dynasty, they sent their armies to the eastern, western and southern coast. Why so? To military expansion, so that they can expand their area. Now, we have reached the story of the Silk Route. Okay, so students, let us start the topic of the Silk Route. Now, you're all familiar with this silk, I hope. Okay, it's a fine fabric which is available in many stores. Now, how did it begin? Now, the rich glossy colors of silk as well as its smooth texture makes it a highly valued fabric in most societies. Okay, it is a very it has a very smooth texture. Making silk is a complicated process, but the process of making silk is very complicated. Now, this was a silk route. What is it? We'll run. Now, as you, if you don't know, that raw silk has to be extracted from the cocoons of silkworms, then spun into thread and then woven into cloth. Techniques of making silk were first invented in China around 7,000 years ago. While the methods remain a closely guarded secret for thousands of years, some people from China who went to distant lands on foot, horseback and on camels carried silk with them. The path they followed came to be known as the Silk Route. So what does this mean? So there was one country in particular who perfected the art of making silk, and that was China, correct? Now the Chinese kept it a secret. They didn't tell anyone how to make silk. Now silk was very much in demand, especially in the Roman Empire. So the path the people took, okay, either the land route or the sea route, through which they used to come all the way from Europe to China, that path came to be known as the Silk Route. Route means way, correct? So that path came to be known as Silk Route. Now there were two options, either come by land or by the sea. Both the journeys were perilous and they used to take at least 5 to 6 months. Okay, it was a very long journey because in earlier times the people can only come through caravans, camels and horse, right? Now there was fear of bandits as well, people who will loot your collection, whatever stuff you are taking. Okay, bandits, what they do, they will just take it from you and threaten to kill you. And through sea, if you are coming, there is always the added danger of storms. Now what happens? Sometimes Chinese rulers sent gifts of silk to rulers in Iran and West Asia, and from there the knowledge of silk spread further west. About 2000 years ago, wearing silk became the fashion among rulers and rich people in Rome. Underline this, that from about 2000 years ago from today, wearing silk became a fashion in the Roman Empire. It was very expensive. Now silk was very expensive as it had to be brought all the way from China. Okay, because if someone in Rome wants to wear silk, Rome is all the way here in Europe, as you can see on the map, and China is all the way here. Now if someone in Rome wants to wear something made up of silk, they had to send someone or go to China themselves so that they can take the silk material back to their kings. Through mountains and deserts, people living along the route often demanded payments for allowing traders to pass through. Now what happened? The kings who used to have empires near these areas, what they started doing, they started collecting taxes, that if you want to pass through this area, you will have to pay tax to us. Okay. Now on page number 84 and 85, students, you can have a look at map 6, okay, which shows the Silk routes and its branches. Okay, in your book as well, the Silk route map is given. Now, some kings tried to control large portions of the route. The kings tried to control this route. This was because why they started controlling it? So that they can benefit from taxes, tributes and gifts that were brought by traders traveling along the route. In return, they often protected the traders who passed through their kingdoms from attacks by robbers. Okay. Now what they used to do, they used to demand taxes from the people who will travel through these routes, and in return they would say that we are giving you protection from the robbers and bandits. The best known of the rulers who controlled the Silk route were the Kushana rulers. Okay. Now let us learn more about Silk route. As you can see, this is silk. It is an extremely expensive commodity since ancient times. Okay, this fabric is used in making saris and other clothing material. Now this was the Silk route. Okay, now the silk, the process and the art of making silk was invented in China around 7,000 years ago from today, and they kept it a secret for thousands of years. They didn't tell anyone how to make silk. Okay, silk was extracted from a silkworm, okay, from its cocoon, which was spun into thread and then woven into cloth. And people travel all the way from Rome to China just to get silk. Okay, because the Chinese people didn't tell anyone how to make the silk. Now they traded to distant land through dangerous road across the mountains and deserts just to get silk. The people, the traveler, they had to go through deserts and mountains just to get silk. Here is the land route and the sea route. Okay, the Silk route, which was either you take the journey by land or by sea. So students, the best known of the rulers who controlled the Silk route were the Kushanas. The kingdom who was best at controlling the Silk route were the Kushanas, who ruled over Central Asia and Northwest India for around 2000 years ago. Their two major centers of power were Peshawar and Mathura. Okay, Peshawar and Mathura were their two main centers of power, and this was the area in which the Kushana people, Kushana Empire used to rule over. Now, Takshila was also included in their kingdom. During their rule, a branch of the Silk route extended from Central Asia down to the seaports at the mouth of river Indus. Okay, now Mathura and Peshawar were the two important cities of the Kushana Empire. Peshawar in present day lies in Pakistan, while Mathura is a part of India. Okay. Now, the Kushanas were among the earliest rulers of the subcontinent to issue gold coins. As you can see here, the route is passing through both Mathura and Peshawar. Here is Mathura and here is Peshawar, and the route, the Silk route, is passing through both of these countries. So the Kushanas had greater influence. They used to collect great taxes from these two places. Okay, so this is our next topic now, the spread of Buddhism on page number 95. Please open your book there. Now the most famous Kushana ruler was Kanishka. Underline this, that the most famous Kushana ruler was Kanishka, who ruled around 1900 years ago. He organized a Buddhist council where scholars met and discussed important matters. Okay, now Kushana's ruler Kanishka, the most important ruler of Kushanas was Kanishka. He organized a Buddhist council where all the scholars and important people met. Now one particular person who was important, who was present in that meeting, was Ashvaghosha, a poet who composed a biography of the Buddha known as the Buddha Charita. Lived in his court. Ashvaghosha and other Buddhist scholars now began writing in Sanskrit. A new form of Buddhism emerged that is called the Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, so let us learn about the spread of Buddhism. Kanishka was the most famous and liberal ruler. What is liberal means? He believed in freedom. Now, Buddhist council, he organized a meeting of the scholars and a Buddhist council was called, in which he discussed a lot of important stuff about the spread of Buddhism. Now, Buddhist scholars started writing in Sanskrit. Earlier in chapters, we remember that when Buddhism was started, they were using the language of the common people, that was Prakrit. But now, as time was moving on, people were beginning to adapt new languages, and Sanskrit was adapted by the Buddhism, by the Buddhists. Now, Ashvaghosha composed Buddha Charita, which is a biography of the Buddha. Now, a new form of Buddhism emerged. Okay, Buddhism was divided into two parts, two sects, as they are called, Hinayana and Mahayana. A new form of Buddhism known as Mahayana Buddhism had developed. Now, what was the difference between these two sects of Buddhism? Okay, let us see. The Hinayana and the Mahayana Buddhism were very similar, except in Hinayana Buddhism, the Buddha was considered as a human being who received enlightenment and he used to preach people. Okay, but in the other one, in the Hinayana, people were against idol worship as well. But Mahayana Buddhism considered Buddha as God. Okay, they saw that the Buddha was God and they used to worship him. They used to worship Buddha and all his related signs and idols. Okay, many statues were made in Mathura and Takshila. Now, earlier the Buddha's presence was shown in sculptures by using certain signs. For instance, his attainment of enlightenment was shown by sculptures of the people tree. Okay, now a new people also emerged. Now statues of the Buddha were made. Many of those were found in Mathura while others were made in Takshila. Now here is another topic in this paragraph. The second change was a belief in bodhisattvas. Who were the bodhisattvas? Bodhisattvas were the people, they were the person who attained enlightenment. Now these were the people who attained enlightenment when they used to follow the teachings of the Buddha. They also received knowledge. Okay, once they attained enlightenment, now these people, they could live in isolation and meditate in peace. What the bodhisattvas used to do, once they attained enlightenment, they used to meditate and live alone in isolation. However, instead of doing that, but now what happened, they changed. Instead of doing that, they remained in the world to teach and help other people. Now instead of isolating themselves, they started to teach other people. Okay, some of them worked to spread Buddhist teaching. The worship of bodhisattvas also started now. Now the people who were teaching the path of Buddhism, the bodhisattvas, they were started getting popular. Okay, the worship of bodhisattvas became popular and spread throughout Central Asia, China, and later to Korea and Japan. Now Buddhism was spreading outside India as well. It started from India, then the religion went outside. Where did it reach? It reached to Central Asia, China, Korea, and Japan. Now Buddhism also spread to western and southern India, where dozens of caves were hollowed out or hills for monks to live in. Okay, it started in the western part. Okay, as you can see, the Buddhism spread to western and southern India, where dozens of caves were followed out. Okay, dozens of caves were hollowed out in the western Ghats and all the hills which are found on this region. So that the people, the followers of Buddha, they can live in monasteries. We learned about this earlier. So here are some images of the caves which were hollowed out. Okay, look how beautifully they have designed the entire sculpture. Now, some of these caves were made on the orders of kings and queens. The kings and queens used to order these, others by merchants and farmers. They were often located near passes through the Western Ghats. Roads connecting prosperous ports on the coast with cities in the Deccan ran through these passes. Now, the roads, they used to connect these places to the cities. Okay, traders probably halted in these cave monasteries during the travel. Now, traders also used to take refuge in these monasteries when they used to travel. Now, apart from the apart from Korea, Japan and Central Asia, Buddhism also spread southeastwards. Now, Buddhism also spread to the eastern part of India. Now, which countries are there? That is Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand and Indonesia. The older form of Buddhism known as Theravada Buddhism was more popular in these areas. Now, in the southeast areas, which form of Buddhism was popular? It was the Theravada Buddhism. Underline this here. The Theravada Buddhism spread in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand and other parts of Southeast Asia, including Indonesia. So students, up until now we have discovered about traders and kings. Now the last topic of this chapter, okay, the last topic of the chapter that we have discussed, that is the pilgrims. So let us start reading the next topic, that is the quest of the pilgrims. Now, as traders journeyed to distant land in caravans and ships, pilgrims often traveled with them. Now, when traders used to go from one place to another, pilgrims also used to go with them. Now, who were pilgrims? There is a yellow box given on page number 97. You can see the definition. Pilgrims are men and women who undertake journeys to holy places in order to offer worship. Now, these are men and women who go to holy places to offer worship. For example, in India, there are so many religious places where people go on a pilgrimage, that is Kedarnath, Somnath, Vaishno Devi, Rameshwaram, right? So people started going to these places to offer worship and they were known as pilgrims, and the journey was called pilgrimage. Okay, now the best known of these are the Chinese Buddhist pilgrim. Now we are going to learn about some Buddhist pilgrims. Okay, that was Faxian, Xuanzang and I King. So student, this is your second internal question. So page number 97, write your second internal question. Name some Chinese Buddhist pilgrims. You have to name some Chinese Buddhist pilgrims. Okay. So the second internal question is, name some Chinese Buddhist pilgrims. What are the names? Write it from here or mark them in your book as well. Faxian, Xuanzang and I King. These were the Chinese pilgrims who came to India. Okay. Now they observed something, they wrote their journals and they took something from India as well, so that they can enrich their own culture, and our own culture was also enriched by these people. Now let us see. The best known of these are the Chinese pilgrims, that is Faxian, who came to subcontinent about 1600 years ago. That was Xuanzang, who came around 1400 years ago, and I King, who came about 50 years after Xuanzang. Okay, they came to visit places associated with the life of the Buddha as well as the famous monasteries. Now, why did they come to India? They came to India so that they can visit the places where Buddha was born, where he received enlightenment, as well as all the monasteries which the Buddhists have built. Now, each of these pilgrims left an account of his journey, whatever, like how they came, where they stayed, which people they interacted with. They left an account of their journey. They wrote of the dangers they encountered on their travels. Okay, they also wrote about the different dangers like weather, bandits, robbers, okay, which they encountered on their travel, which often took years. The travel in earlier times used to take years, of the countries and the monasteries that they visited, and the books they carried back with them. They also carried lots of books with them. Okay. Now, Xuanzang, who took the land route back to China through the northwest and Central Asia, carried back with him statues of the Buddha made of gold, silver and sandalwood. Now, Xuanzang, okay, he took the statues of Buddha of gold, silver and sandalwood and over 600 manuscripts. Manuscripts means ancient texts. Okay, 600 manuscripts were loaded on the back of 20 horses. Okay, he carried 20 horses worth of stuff with him. Over 50 manuscripts were lost when the boat on which he was crossing the Indus capsized. But out of the 650 manuscripts were lost. Why? Because the boat he was traveling on capsized. It turned over because of storms. And what did he do? He spent the rest of his life, okay, Xuanzang, he spent the rest of his life translating the remaining manuscript from Sanskrit into Chinese. Okay, now why was he translating all this stuff? So that the people of China who don't know Sanskrit, they can also read these scriptures of Buddhism. Okay, and that is why the religion spread from one country to another. Because of the pilgrims who came here to visit the holy places, what happened? When they came here, they interacted with people, they observed our culture, they wrote about it, and then they took it back to their country and told their people about it, so that they can also understand what are the different religion and practices of India were. Okay, and that is why the religion started to spread. So this was the pilgrims part. Now our next topic is beginning of bhakti. Now let us start about our own country, India. Now this was the time when the worship of certain deities, which became a central figure of later Hinduism, gained in importance. Now this became a central feature later in Hinduism. Now these deities included Shiva, Vishnu and goddesses such as Durga. These deities were worshipped through bhakti. Now what was bhakti? Underline this. It is an idea that became very popular at this time. Underline from here. Bhakti is generally understood as a person's devotions to his or her chosen deity. Now what the people can do, they started selecting one particular deity and then they used to worship them. The popular deities were Shiva, Vishnu and goddesses such as Durga. Okay. Now one important part of bhakti system was that anybody, whether rich or poor, belonging to the so-called high or low caste, man or woman, could follow the path of bhakti. Okay. Now, the idea of bhakti is present in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a sacred book of the Hindus, which is included in the Mahabharata. In this, Krishna, the god, asked Arjun, his devotee and friend, to abandon all dharmas and take refuge in him, as only he can set Arjuna free from every evil. If you have seen Mahabharata on TV, if you have parents or grandparents told you about it, there is one particular chapter in which Krishna, the god, gives guidance to Arjun, who is in dilemma at that moment to whether to fight his own brothers or not. Okay, so what does Krishna tells him? He tells him that you should abandon all dharma and take refuge in him, Krishna, as only Krishna can set Arjun free from every evil. This form of worship gradually spread to different part of the country. Now how the people visualize this, that they started worshipping one particular deity. Okay, those who followed the system of bhakti emphasized devotion and individual worship of god or goddesses rather than the performance of elaborate sacrifices. Now they started just to have one devotion, okay, towards one particular god or goddess. According to this system of belief, if a deity worships the chosen deity with pure heart, now what the people used to believe in this, that if you worship this chosen deity with a pure heart, the deity will appear in the form in which he or she may desire. That if you worship the deity enough, the god or goddesses will come in front of you in whatever form they desire. Okay, so the human being could be thought of as a human being, so the deity could be thought of as a human being, lion, tree or any other form. Once this idea gained acceptance, artists made beautiful images of these deities. Now, once this idea started that if you worship a particular deity with pure heart, what happened? The deity will present itself in front of you, either in a form of human being, lion, tree or any other form. Okay. Now, because the deities were special, these images of the deity were often placed within special home places that we describe as temples. Now, the images of these deities began to be planted in special homes or buildings called temples. Okay, we will learn about temples in our earlier chapter, in our other chapters. Okay, bhakti inspired some of the best expression in art, poetry and architecture. Now, bhakti, because of bhakti, people started writing, they started painting a lot of stuff and sculpting a lot of sculpture. So, students, now, So student, this was it about this chapter. That was chapter number 9, Traders, Kings and Pilgrims. I hope you understood this well. Please mark all the internal questions properly. We'll meet again in our next class. Thank you.